ExxonMobil. And these solutions can help businesses like yours.
Or yours.
Or yours.
Heavy industry with low emissions. Let's deliver.
Top phase that we always get into.
So if we're in a bubble, the trigger was December's Fed meeting where they said their reaction function was asymmetrically dovish. And I think a reiteration of that despite the data coming up. So I think if, like, for example, if in the Fed meeting they're going to go, we're desperate to cut, we don't see signs of it yet, that will fuel the bubble. That will fuel the bubble. So I said, if you want to go down the bubble analogy, well, then we're just still in the early stages of it, triggered in December, but it needs a couple more rounds of the Fed going, we're determined to kind of keep on easing and supporting this economy, despite the fact it doesn't need any support right now.
OK. So we're not in a bubble yet. We could be in a bubble. If the Fed cuts, that will start to push the bubble. What do we think?
I'll add one more element to this before I opine, and that brings me perfectly, actually, to my Caught My Eye story on a topic that I think you both have been very excited about, Bitcoin. I've been less excited about it, but I think this chart shows a little bit about why I might be getting a little bit more excited about it. We hit, I think, the 64,000 mark on Bitcoin, which is what the chart shows. You're going back to 2021 levels. What's interesting to me, we're not at a record high yet. 68,991.85 is the record high back in 2021. What's interesting to me about this chart is that if you were to overlay it, which is, I think, Mark's pet peeve, with Euro Stock 600, it would look very, very similar in that month to month, almost week to week, the line would look almost identical. And you can actually see kind of this idea that the fact that we're right back to 2021 levels, we've kind of just made a gigantic U-turn, a smile, if you will, is the same kind of concept we've been talking about in European stocks as well. So my question to Mark is Bitcoin some sort of risk sentiment leading indicator for the macro elsewhere? Is that how we should be thinking about Bitcoin?
First of all, I just like that the fact that chart gives me a price tag of $64,000. The title was the $64,000 mark. But no, I do think it's not the sentiment guide it was before. I think a couple of years ago we thought it was. It was the measure of the retail trader. I think it was the idea that so many people were piling into crypto, were also piling into the real kind of meme stocks, frenzy stocks. I think we've got a little bit of that, but it does seem like there's a bit of a disassociation. The people who've clung with crypto over the last couple of years have a much more substantial base of wealth now that they're working off. It's less that kind of meme stock leverage. So I think the refeed through to the general retail enthusiasm, stocks enthusiasm, isn't as strong. But to go to your overlay point, and overlays can work as long as you understand what they're kind of saying. They are dangerous, but they're both saying that there's still easy liquidity in the system, which goes back to your point, Guy, is that at the moment, monetary policy, if anything, is not tight enough because there's still abundant liquidity in the system. The economy still can cope. And so I think that both those metrics are showing that, or any stock market in the world is showing that.
It's quite remarkable what Bitcoin has done, though, given it's worked through all of the collapses that we've seen around key brokerages, of course, Sam Bankman-Fried, all the rest of it, all the regulatory scrutiny. So it's at that 69,000 level, almost 69,000 level, at a time when it was still a kind of Wild West market. And now, of course, you have a bit of institutional play. It's worked through all those regulatory challenges, and it's back to kind of 64,000. That in itself is a story. But in terms of the market, to what extent is the upside that we're seeing in these markets and the rally that we've seen across equities challenging the Fed as well, in terms of the inflation? Households are feeling wealthier in the US because they look at their 401ks. Is that a constraint as well? Is the Fed going to be concerned about that in terms of monetary conditions?
I think they're challenging the Fed because the Fed started this. I think, like, the real trigger for this kind of stage was the fact that, you know, I did not anticipate the Fed being so dovish in December, and most people didn't. And the reason is that it did not seem like they would make that mistake again. There was no sign yet in December that they should be turning quite so dovish yet. And given the mistake of 2021 of not putting on the brakes early enough and fueling that bubble, everyone thought they wouldn't do it again. They did do it again in December. So they have definitely fueled this rally and helped us rally again. And that's why you've got to be bullish. In the same way in 2021, even though you thought it was folly, you had to kind of ride that wave. Now, we talked about this bubble. It's certainly a wave created by the Fed. I think it's still too early to call it a bubble that you've got to get excited to kind of challenge. But ultimately, the Fed is fueling this.
What's the catalyst that takes us out? You look at it another way. Is there a catalyst coming that will turn the markets in a different direction? We talked about potentially the US election being one of those. What happens in terms of the geopolitics? All of those risks, very hard to quantify. Is there a catalyst coming? And if there is a dip, do you buy it?
So there are two catalysts to change the narrative. Until then, you do buy the dip. I think there's been lots of little short-term things that are disruptors. We talked about NFP next week, or whatever else catalyst. But all those dips you kind of buy until the narrative changing shifts. And those two narrative changing shifts are, one, we just get a string of really bad data and the economy is clearly in trouble. But again, I don't think that can come from just one print, which is why we talked about a weak NFP won't change it. Or the other thing is the Fed basically goes, we got it wrong in December. We erred. I mean, they're never going to say it quite like that, but they suddenly go back to talking about hikes again, kind of thing, really changing the narrative massively. That would be very problematic for stocks, because this leg is fueled by the fact that the Fed has said we're desperate to cut, even though the economy is not giving us a reason to.
So let's put monetary policy on ice for a second. When does this market price in a GOP frontrunner, whether that's President Trump, which is what it's looking right now, or with some sort of miracle, Nikki Haley? When does that get priced into these markets?
I think in a sudden way, not for much later in the year. I just think the narrative for the US election has been the same for the last 4 years in terms of that, or not, fast 4 years, maybe a bit of a stretch, but for a last extended period, we've kind of assumed it's going to be Trump versus Biden again, unless something happens to one of them. One of them's not able to run for whatever reason. So it's not like there's new information on that front. We're still going towards an election which we thought it was Trump-Biden, but I would have said that 6 months ago, would have said that 3 months ago. So maybe a marginal more probability. I think what changes is we suddenly actually get to that election, and then people have to confront it. One of the candidates hasn't been ruled out for whatever reason, and that's the election we're dealing with.
Mark, just quickly, if you had to make a decision, had to make a choice, S&P or the Nikkei?
Nikkei, but I'm the person who constantly thinks that US stocks will underperform and have got that horribly wrong, so yeah.
OK.
Mark, perfect way to finish.
Thank you very much. This is Marcus Live Executive Editor Mark Cudmore, working through a number of key things for these markets, of course, for us and bringing us the analysis. Remember, you can get up-to-date analysis and insight from Mark and the rest of the team. Just go to MLive Go on your terminal. Let's get your stocks to watch now with Bloomberg's Lizzie Bird. And you're starting then with Lufthansa, Lizzie.
Yeah, Guy's favourite subject, airline. And we go to Lufthansa out of Germany because it's reportedly reconsidering its plans to buy out ITA, which is, of course, the old Alitalia. Now, this is a report in La Repubblica, the Italian newspaper. Lufthansa reportedly thinks that the costs of the EU's demands on the deal outweigh the benefits, and the deal would have been part of Italy's plans to cut its stake and cut its debt. So we keep an eye on Lufthansa at the open. We also mind Santander, Spain's biggest bank, of course. So it's reportedly looking to cut 320 jobs on its US retail banking operation in order to focus more on digital operations. So this equates to about 2.7% of the US workforce. You have to wonder whether traders are actually going to punish Santander for this at the open, given that it's a broader trend in European banking. And Santander, over the past year, has been sweeping up staff from its rivals, as you've seen the layoffs on Wall Street, about 200 of them over the past year. Speaking of cleaning up, finally, we go to Henkel, which is, of course, the German maker of detergents and household goods. Persil is one that you might know, doesn't own them in the UK, of course, though. It also makes sellotape. And inflation has been a sticky business for Henkel over the past year. We had its results for the full year at 6:30 p.m. London time. Pretty good on the margin outlook, a little better, but on the sales side, a little soft. So far, it's up 3.4% year to date. We'll see how traders judge those results at the open.
Bloomberg's Lizzie Burden there, bringing us our stocks to watch, and a little healthy dose of puns.
We're going to talk about those.
We appreciate it.
Off air later. Believe you me.
I appreciate them. I love it. A little joy. We needed it. As someone who didn't know what Henkel was, the pun certainly helped. What Mark was talking about here on the macro front, though, is really interesting because the geopolitics is so fascinating to me because we haven't heard the full rhetoric coming out of President Trump yet. He's kind of dialed it back, which I know doesn't seem like it, but he has, relative to his 2016 campaign, to kind of seem as kind of the sane front runner of the GOP. I'm wondering if confirmed after Super Tuesday that he is indeed going to get the nomination, does that 60% tariff rhetoric, does the free trade agreement with the UK, does the EU steel tariffs, does that kind of rhetoric increase and spook the markets?
And to your point, I mean, yeah, well, does he take the gloves off? I mean, 60% tariffs, he's already voiced those. Those seem it's pretty aggressive. But we've also learned, haven't we, that it's not just China that's going to be the focus of his eye. It is, of course, the European Union as well, and potentially the UK, depending on how friendly our government is going to be with him. So the focus, and it's just going to accelerate, isn't it? If you get a Trump nomination, it's going to accelerate that debate within Brussels around how to ensure that they have that domestic strength.
I'm going to let Tom get a glass of water.
It's been an early start, yeah.
Totally. Do you buy dollar earners, sell euro earners in that kind of scenario? Is Trump good for the dollar? Do you sell European luxury stocks because you're worried about what is going to happen on the tariff front? It's interesting. You got downgrades today on Ferrari. I think it's City out with those. Kind of where does that story land? Novo Nordisk has been really strong. Do you have a problem with that company?
Yeah, regulation.
I just look at the regulations. I don't know where it comes down, but you think about the stocks that have done really well recently. They could all have some sort of significant Trump exposure built into them.
And think about all the corporate earnings. So many of them are talking about this U.S. exposure, this U.S. resilience. How much of that can they depend on going into 2025? Plenty more to digest. The market open is next. This is Bloomberg.
The world needs ways to reduce carbon emissions.
ExxonMobil can help.
We're working on solutions for our business
That can also help businesses like yours. Heavy industry with low emissions. Let's deliver.
Can AI make chatbots act like your very own personal assistant? Yes, with ServiceNow.
Growing up, every time I listened to a song, I would imagine how the music video would play out. And I started to film with a Galaxy phone, epic cinematic one-shots. It allows me to be a lot more fluid with my shots. I could really share my point of view. Hollywood bigwigs used to dictate the story. Now, with social media, the people get to pick the stars. Your phone is your brush. It's up to you to decide what to paint. Boom!
Bankman-Fried has pled not guilty to multiple fraud charges.
Sam was just too important in the crypto community.
When someone says, I'm going to give $1 billion in the next 2 years, like that catches everybody's attention.
As time went on, their ideas got like weirder and weirder.
I don't think he even had almost a conception at some point that it was wrong or right. I think he just had the mentality that he has to win.
This committee will not stop until we uncover the full truth behind the collapse of FTX.
Sue, Mark.
Are you in?
I'm in.
I'm in.
We're in.
Will this be the last of its kind? No. This is the nature of capitalism. Get over it.
Welcome to the world of decentralized finance.
You can see the massive gains for the OG crypto coin.
The breakout we have all perhaps long awaited finally realized. We'll see if it sticks.
Bloomberg's covering all things crypto, the people.
There's no question this industry is composed of some bad actors and some good actors.
The transactions.
Volumes have surpassed $24 billion per day.
And the technology.
Stop talking about the technology. Start demonstrating the utility.
Bloomberg Crypto, Tuesdays.
Next time on The Deal.
I realized a long time ago that being a football player or